Imagine the devil himself etching escape routes into the earth, invisible to the wicked but glowing for the righteous. In Georgia's blood-soaked fields, one man's name became a curse on plantation lips, a spectral whisper promising divine reckoning. He didn't just flee, he unraveled their empire of sin, one hidden path at a time. But what unholy knowledge did he possess that made tyrants tremble before God? In the shadowed heart of Antebellum, Georgia, where the red clay soil drank the sweat and blood of the enslaved like a thirsty demon, a legend took root, not in the grand halls of power, but in the whispered prayers of those chained to the land. This was no ordinary tale of rebellion, it was a saga of divine cartography, where the very ground seemed to conspire against the oppressors, guided by a man whose soul burned with the fire of retribution. His name was Elijah, though the planters spat it like venom, fearing it invoked judgment from above. Born under a sky heavy with storm clouds in 1817, on a forsaken tobacco patch near Augusta, Elijah entered a world where freedom was a myth, and survival a daily bargain with fate. But fate, or perhaps Providence itself, had marked him for something greater, to become the unseen architect of liberation, mapping not just the physical wilderness but the moral labyrinth of human depravity. Picture the scene: dawn breaks over the plantation, a pale, unforgiving light filtering through the twisted branches of ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss like funeral shrouds. The air hangs thick with the metallic tang of dew-kissed earth and the acrid smoke from overseers' pipes. Slaves shuffle from their ramshackle cabins, crude structures of splintered wood and mud daub, roofs leaking eternal misery, their bare feet sinking into the cool, unforgiving clay that clings like guilt to the soul. Among them, a young boy, no more than 5, squats in the dirt beside his mother, Sarah. Her hands, etched with scars from the whip and the thorn, move with deliberate grace, tracing invisible lines in the soil. "See here, child," she murmurs, her voice a soft hymn against the morning chorus of clucking hens and distant meal brays. "This is how the Lord hides his paths. Water flows low, seeking the humble places. Follow it, and you'll find life." Sarah wasn't just teaching survival, she was imparting a sacred geometry, a biblical echo of the Israelites' exodus through parted seas and hidden manna. In her eyes, the land wasn't mere dirt, it was a testament, scripted by the Creator himself, revealing secrets to those pure enough to see. Elijah absorbed it all, his wide eyes reflecting the golden hues of sunrise, his small fingers mimicking her patterns. He didn't know then that these lessons were forged in the furnace of her own bondage, brought from the tobacco fields of Virginia where she'd been torn from her kin like a page from scripture. But as the years unfolded, each groove in the earth became a verse in his growing gospel of escape. By 1824, when Elijah was 7, tragedy struck like a thunderbolt from a wrathful God. Sarah was sold, auctioned off like chattel at a dusty crossroads market, her cries muffled by the jeers of bidders. The buyer, a cotton baron from near Milledgeville, loaded her onto a creaking wagon bound for the Hartwell estate. Elijah, still clinging to her skirts as children under 10 often did, was dragged along, his world fracturing like dry earth under a plow. The journey stretched 3 agonizing days, the wagon jolting over rutted paths that scarred the landscape. Elijah, pressed against his mother's side, stared out at the unfolding panorama, the red clay hills yielding to sandy loam, pines whispering secrets to one another in the wind, creeks glinting like silver veins under the relentless sun. The air shifted scents, from the sharp resin of forest to the damp rot of lowlands, each change a marker he etched into his memory. Sounds enveloped him, the rhythmic creak of wheels, the snort of horses, the occasional crack of the driver's whip echoing like Judgment Day. Hartwell Estate loomed like a monument to human hubris, 3,000 acres of manicured hell, where over 200 souls toiled under the sun's merciless gaze. Fields stretched endlessly, cotton bolls blooming white against the green, like false promises of purity. Elijah and Sarah were thrust into the rhythm of the land, dawn to dusk labor, backs bent in the blistering heat, hands raw from picking thorns disguised as fiber. The overseer, Dinkins, patrolled on horseback, his braided cowhide whip coiled like a serpent ready to strike. His face, weathered and cruel, bore the lines of a man who'd sold his soul for power. Yet amid the drudgery, Elijah's education deepened. He noted how certain fields pooled with water after rains, turning to treacherous mud that could swallow a man whole, symbolic, perhaps, of the quicksands of sin that ensnared the unwary. He observed the property's edges, where cultivated land bled into wild thickets, the transition marked by shifts in bird calls and insect hums. Dinkins avoided the western marshes, where the ground softened into betrayal, mists rising like ghosts from forgotten graves. It was in these fringes that Sarah's teachings took on a prophetic weight. One sweltering afternoon, as they worked a remote field near the tree-line, the air buzzing with flies, the sun baking their skin to leather, she leaned close, her breath hot against his ear. "The land speaks in tongues, Elijah. Listen close. Plants whisper of water below, see how the willows bend? That's the Lord's provision, hidden for the faithful." Her words carried the cadence of psalms, invoking a divine order amid chaos. Elijah nodded, his heart pounding with a mix of awe and fear. But she warned him, "Hide your light, boy. The wicked fear the wise, for knowledge is the key to chains unlocked. Let them think you're blind, while you see with God's eyes." 6 months later, the lesson crystallized in blood and shadow. Sarah's escape was a meticulously woven plan, a testament to her faith in divine guidance. Early March, 1828, nights crisp with lingering winter. Chill, deterring lazy patrols, yet mild enough for survival under the stars. She'd hoarded scraps, cornbread hardened like stone, dried berries stolen from the edges of fields stashed in a hollowed oak that groaned like an ancient prophet. A pilfered knife, its blade smeared with pine tar for silence and seal, tucked into her makeshift pack. The moon hid its face behind clouds, blanketing the world in inky blackness, as if heaven itself conspired in secrecy. Elijah awoke to her hand clamped over his mouth, her form a silhouette in the cabin's gloom. The air smelled of damp wood and fierce wet. "My son," she whispered, her voice breaking like waves on a distant shore, "walk in the light I showed you. The roots lead to freedom, follow them to Canaan." Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, held the promise of redemption. Then she vanished, slipping through the door like a spirit ascending. Dawn brought hell. The hounds bayed, a demonic chorus echoing through the mist-shrouded fields as Dinkins rallied the hunters. Bloodhounds, their noses twitching like accusatory fingers, picked up her scent. The party thundered off, white men on horseback, whips cracking, lanterns flickering like false stars. Elijah, hidden among the cabins, watched their departure, his chest tight with dread. Sarah's trail wound 13 miles across swollen streams where water rushed cold and unforgiving, through thorn-choked thickets that tore at flesh like the barbs of conscience, over rocky outcrops that bruised feet and spirit alike. She evaded longer than any before, her path a zigzag of cunning, doubling back on streams to confound the dogs, climbing trees to mask her scent with bark and leaf, but the beasts cornered her in a narrow ravine, the walls slick with moss, the air heavy with the rot of fallen logs. Exhausted, her dress torn, feet blistered and bleeding like stigmata, she collapsed. They dragged her back in irons, chains clanking like the gates of perdition. Elijah, forced to the fields, glimpsed the procession, Sarah's head bowed, body trembling, yet her eyes defiant, a martyr's gaze. The punishment unfolded in the central yard, under a sky leaden with impending rain. The entire enslaved community assembled, a sea of bowed heads and clenched fists. Dinkins, his face twisted in sadistic glee, wielded the whip, 50 lashes, each crack echoing like thunder from Mount Sinai. Blood striped her back, soaking the earth, turning the clay to crimson mud. Elijah, 11 and small among the crowd, forced himself to witness every stroke, every gasp, every drop. It was his vigil, a searing imprint on his soul, understand the enemy, for evil wears a human face. Sarah lingered 3 weeks, fever ravaging her like divine fire purifying the faithful. In the dim cabin, lit by a single tallow candle flickering shadows on the walls, Elijah held her hand, cold yet strong. Her final breath carried words like scripture, the roots, they lead home. God maps the way for the just. Remember, and redeem. She passed, leaving him orphaned in body but armored in spirit. Sold at auction like a beast of burden, Elijah, now 11, wiry and watchful, was bought by a rice planter on the Georgia coast near Darien. The coastal world assaulted his senses, salt-laden winds whipping off the Atlantic, marshes stretching like endless veils of green, the constant roar of waves crashing against barrier islands. Tides ruled here, a rhythmic pulse like the breath of God, flooding fields twice daily. The plantation was a watery inferno, slaves wading knee-deep in muck, plagued by swarms of mosquitoes humming like accusatory spirits, venomous snakes slithering through the reeds, alligators lurking with prehistoric patience. Malaria stalked the quarters, claiming lives like a biblical plague. Yet in this crucible, Elijah found a mentor, old Josiah, a weathered sailor enslaved after a shipwreck 4 decades prior. His skin, etched with tattoos of distant seas, spoke of worlds beyond chains. Josiah, surviving through nautical wisdom, took the boy under his wing. Evenings by the tidal creeks, water lapping softly against mud banks, Josiah's gravelly voice wove tales. Tides are the Lord's clockwork, boy. Moon pulls M, wind shapes M, land resists M. High tide opens doors that low tide seals. Learn this, and you'll dance between worlds unseen. Elijah devoured the knowledge. The Altamaha River's meanders, connected by hidden channels like veins in a divine body, barrier islands with secret springs bubbling fresh water amid salt, the color of waves betraying depths, turquoise shallows, indigo abysses. Birds became harbingers, pelicans gliding at dusk to roosts on high ground, herons stabbing at fish in shallows marking safe crossings. Josiah's lessons infused spirituality, the seas of baptistry, washing away sins. But cross it wrong, and its judgments flood. At 14, Elijah witnessed Josiah's masterstroke, aiding 3 souls escape on a spring tide, moon full and luminous. A pilfered skiff slipped into channels at peak flood, vanishing north as tides receded, erasing paths like forgiven transgressions. Suspicion fell on Josiah, but proof eluded. Weeks later, he succumbed. Fever official, poison suspected, pulling Elijah close in his final rasp. Listen to the coast's sermon, smells foretell storms, birds preach direction, water confesses all. Become the ghost God intended. 3 more years on the rice fields honed Elijah, memorizing 150 miles of shore, predicting tides with prophetic accuracy, his body forged into a temple of strength, 6 feet, muscled from toil, eyes sharp as eagles. In 1834, at 17, sold inland to a cotton spread near the Okmulgee River, he mapped the journey, roads twisting like serpents, rivers fording with gravelly beds, shortcuts through pine-scented woods. The new plantation bordered a cypress swamp, a morass of dark water, trees rising like sentinels from the deep, moss-veiling truths. Overseers dubbed it suicide's embrace, but Elijah saw Eden's remnant. Sundays, under guise of foraging rabbits snared in twine traps, herbs gathered for poultices, he probed its depths. The swamp breathed, splashes of hidden creatures, buzz of dragonflies, eerie calls of owls at twilight. He decoded its symbols, flood marks on bark like Noah's covenant, vegetation shifts signaling solid ground, animal trails as divine breadcrumbs. Months yielded a mental atlas, 3 routes, one for flood seasons, wading shallow bars, another for dry, skirting quicksand pits, a third for stealth, rafting deep channels. Hazards noted, alligator nests, marked by dragged vegetation, bottomless holes, betrayed by still water. Each foray returned him mud-caked, exhausted, but enlightened, the swamp a metaphor for the soul's journey through sin's mire toward salvation. At 19, the owner's demise scattered the estate. Elijah fetched $850 at Savannah's block premium for his docility. Bought by Elias Hawthorne, whose 4,500-acre cotton empire near Savannah pulsed with 150 enslaved hearts. Borders, Ogeechee River East, flowing to sea like a river of life, western cypress swamp, twin to the last, north-south creeks weaving like threads in fate's tapestry. Hawthorne, educated northerner turned slaver, ruled with calculated mercy, better rations, intact families, yet ironclad control. His overseer, Harlan, embodied brutality, 20 years scars, viewing humans as beasts. Whips sang daily, eyes cold as winter seas. Here, Elijah's map converged, river to coast, swamp to interior, a web of redemption. Whispers spread in quarters, Elijah's gaze held promise, his silence a sermon. Plantations trembled, 17 reported vanishings by 1850, each a thorn in sin's crown. Elijah wasn't just escaping, he was enacting judgment, his paths wholly writ against bondage. As shadows lengthened over fields, Elijah pondered, was this divine calling? Guilt of oppressors, sins of fathers visited upon sons? His mother's roots, Josiah's tides, echoes of Exodus. In quiet moments, kneeling in dirt, he prayed, Lord, make me your instrument. Let the land rise against the wicked. The stage set, tension coiled like a spring tide. Elijah's legend grew, a chilling specter haunting Georgia's elite. What followed would shatter illusions of control, weaving terror into their dreams, a man who knew not just escape, but the soul's uncharted territories. The Grayson Plantation sprawled like a wound across the Georgia lowlands, 4,500 acres of cotton fields bleeding white under the merciless sun of 1837. The Ogeechee River, called Ojiki by those who knew its ancient moods, bordered the east, its waters rising and falling twice daily with the Atlantic's pull, a living reminder that even the mightiest boundaries could shift. Salt mingled with fresh in its lower reaches, turning the banks into a treacherous mosaic of mud and promise. To the west lay the cypress swamp, vast and impenetrable, 2 miles of shadowed water where sunlight fractured into green gold shards through hanging moss. Cypress knees protruded like the fingers of buried saints, accusing the sky. The air here carried the heavy rot of decaying vegetation, mingled with the metallic bite of tannin-stained water. Alligators glided silent beneath the surface, their eyes like coals in the gloom. White men called it forbidden ground, the enslaved knew it as sanctuary if you could read its riddles. Harlan Howell, the overseer, ruled with the certainty of a man who believed God had ordained his cruelty. His whip, braided from rawhide and weighted at the tip, sang through the air like judgment deferred. He enforced passes scrawled on scraps of paper, demanded informants whisper betrayals for extra rations or a spared lash. His eyes, pale and unblinking, scanned the quarters at dusk, searching for the flicker of defiance. The enslaved learned to lower their gazes, to move like shadows, but Elijah, now 20, his frame hardened by years of labor into something unbreakable, watched everything. For his first 6 months, Elijah became invisible in plain sight. He toiled in the fields from first light until the sun bled red on the horizon, hands blistering then callousing over the cotton bolls. He volunteered for the harshest tasks, hauling water in the midday heat, repairing fences in thorn-choked thickets, earning nods of approval from Howell. Reliable nigger, they muttered. But in the quiet hours, his mind mapped the plantation's vulnerabilities, patrol paths that looped predictably at dawn and dusk, blind spots where the river bend hid movement from the big house, the weak links in the chain of power, overseers who drank too much, drivers who slept on watch. Sundays offered respite, a fragile gift under the law. Elijah walked the river bank alone, bare feet sinking into cool mud that sucked at his ankles like regret. The Ogeechee's tides were his scripture, high water flooding channels that vanished at low, creating temporary bridges of water or land. He noted a wide gravel bar where, at ebb tide, the river shallowed to knee-deep, pebbles shifting underfoot like whispered prayers. A narrower choke point where currents surged but banks held firm, strong swimmers could cross even when waters raged. A fallen cypress, half submerged, formed a precarious span during certain phases of the moon. Each crossing carried biblical weight, the parted Red Sea, the Jordan's promise, divine provision hidden in nature's flux. The swamp demanded deeper communion. Elijah entered cautiously, testing every step with a long pole, feeling for solid ground beneath deceptive water. The world closed in, Spanish moss draped like veils over secrets, palmettos rustling in faint breezes, the constant drip-drip from leaves echoing like a heartbeat. He marked landmarks as God might, a lightning-scarred cypress split like a broken covenant, its trunk blackened and hollow, a cluster of palmettos on a subtle rise, roots knitting firmer earth, a spring bubbling clear amid the dark tea-colored mire, fresh water amid corruption, a symbol of grace and desolation. Through accessible fringes. Nothing. 3 days later, surrender. Grayson cursed the loss, another dent in his ledger of souls. But Benjamin had emerged on the far side, met by a free family. Elijah had quietly contacted, dry clothes, cornbread, directions north. Word filtered back years later, Pennsylvania, freedom. The quarters buzzed with quiet awe. Elijah knew the routes. Over 3 years, he guided 4 more, each vetted for strength, wits, desperation. Spaced apart to avoid patterns, one through swamp, another riding spring tide along coast, a third threading pine forests like David's flight from Saul. Routes tailored, the weak swimmer took gravel bars, the swift runner used woods. Each success deepened trust, spread his name like incense through hidden channels. Then Charity arrived in 1841-17, sold from a crumbling Carolina estate. She'd learned letters from a mistress's careless kindness, a dangerous gift. Bold, hungry for more than flight, she sought Elijah. Not just a path, she urged in their third shadowed meeting. Teach me the knowing. Let me carry it forward. Hesitation gripped him, knowledge shared multiplied risk. But her fire mirrored his mother's. 6 weeks, reading landscapes for hidden firmament, spotting fresh springs by vegetation shifts, erasing traces in mud and leaf, discerning ally from betrayer among whites. October, heavy rains turning trails to slurry. Charity vanished into storm. Search yielded silence. She paused at Elijah's free contacts, learned onward routes, pressed north. Months later, coded word, Pennsylvania safe, guiding 2 others with his teachings. Elijah saw the vision unfold, not one man's flight, but a multiplying grace, knowledge spreading like leaven. By 1843, the network spanned 7 counties, 15 souls trained in fragments, guiding independently. Escapes rose subtly, plantation ledgers bled redder. In Savannah's summer heat of 1843, owners convened in shadowed parlors, comparing losses. 23 souls gone in 2 years, triple the norm. Someone teaches them, one growled. Swamps that swallow men whole, rivers crossed at impossible tides, this is no accident. This is conspiracy. Patrols doubled, rewards swelled, inspections tightened. Elijah withdrew, letting suspicions simmer. Then Charity returned 1845, night-shrouded, hair-cropped, men's garb, confidence forged in northern fires. The Northern Network lives, she breathed. Safe houses, conductors, resources. They seek a pipeline structured, sustained, from Georgia to Canada. 3 days in swamp concealment, food smuggled, routes refined, signals devised, bird calls, marked trees, coded hymns. Charity departed, carrying Elijah's promise, consistency through Georgia, if seekers reached him. Messages flowed, abolitionist letters via sailors, preachers' whispers, newspaper codes. Elijah wove them in, avoid compromised paths, exploit seasonal fogs. Escapes sharpened, no longer blind leaps but guided pilgrimages. Grayson noticed. Coincidences mounted, disappearances preceded by sightings near Elijah. Records kept, eyes followed. Elijah sensed the noose tightening. For 8 months 1845 into 1846, he ceased all aid from Grayson lands. Exemplary labor, silent obedience. Suspicion eased. Perhaps mere chance. But the roots had taken hold. The land remembered. Divine justice, patient and inexorable, waited in the tides and shadows. Elijah's work was no longer his alone, it echoed through generations, a haunting legacy of redemption amid retribution. By the spring of 1846, Elijah's network had transcended him, a living vine rooted in the soil of resistance, branching across counties like the veins of a colossal, unseen body. Guides he'd trained, quiet souls with eyes sharpened by his teachings, operated in shadows, moving the desperate through hidden arteries of river, wood, and mire. Escapes continued, not as isolated miracles but as a steady pulse, a divine rhythm eroding the foundations of bondage. Elijah, sensing the noose of scrutiny, had withdrawn from direct aid, but the system breathed on its own, self-sustaining, a testament to knowledge as the ultimate redeemer. Whispers in quarters evolved into coded hymns sung during fieldwork, passing routes like sacred verses, follow the low water where willows weep, evoking biblical streams in the wilderness. Yet fate, or perhaps providence testing its chosen, thrust Elijah into the crucible. A family of 6, 2 parents, for children ranging from toddling innocence to adolescent fire, vanished from the Terrence Plantation, 20 miles north. The escape unfolded with ethereal precision, a night shrouded in mist, no moon to betray, weather mild as a blessing. They left scant traces, a broken twig here, a faint footprint there, dissolving into the ether like spirits ascending. No panicked flight, this was orchestrated grace, slipping through pine thickets and creek beds as if the land parted for them. Jonathan Terrence, the owner, a portly man with political tendrils snaking through Georgia's halls, his face flushed with perpetual rage, seethed. His estate, 5,000 acres of rice and cotton, had been a fortress of control, but this breach mocked him. Not content with recapture, he craved annihilation of the network, a purging fire to scorch the roots. He summoned Cyrus Hale, Virginia's infamous slave catcher, a gaunt figure with hollow cheeks and eyes like polished obsidian, trailing a reputation forged in blood. Hale arrived with 5 hardened aides, 25 hounds bred for the hunt, sleek, snarling beasts with noses attuned to despair, and a methodical arsenal, maps unrolled on oaken tables, ledgers of past escapes, interrogations scripted like inquisitions. The air in Terrence's study hung heavy with cigar smoke and malice as Hale dissected the pattern. "This ain't chance," he drawled, voice gravelly from years on trails, finger tracing invisible lines on a crude map. "Someone's intimate with this ground, swamps that swallow fools, rivers that shift like serpents. They've been schooling him for years. And that someone? Likely bedded down on one of your neighbor's lands, hiding in plain toil. Hale's campaign was surgical: interviews in dim cabins, eyes probing for flinches, analysis of terrain under lantern light, noting how fog-cloaked valleys at dawn, profiles built from whispers and wounds. He radiated an unholy patience, a predator's calm. Plantation owners, intrigued by the legend, granted access, their curiosity a veil over fear. When Hale reached Hawthorne's domain, renamed Grayson in the script, but Hawthorne in my continuity, 2 days blurred into scrutiny. Fields buzzed with tension, slaves averting gazes as Hale prowled. He pegged Elijah in moments, not for overt sin, but for the absence of flaw. Elijah worked with mechanical grace, eyes downcast yet absorbing all, the overseer's limp, the dog's restless pacing. Too serene, too contained, a mind veiled like Moses in the cleft rock. The interview unfolded in a tool shed, air thick with rust and hay. Hale's questions danced casual: know the local bends? Rivers got moods? Elijah replied measured, feigning the dullness of the oppressed, enough detail to seem observant, not enough to unveil mastery. But on the western swamp, impossible quagmire, sir. Swallows men whole. His eyes, for a fraction, darted northwest toward a hidden ridge of firm ground. A tell, lightning quick, born of instinct. Hale's lips twitched, he filed it like a blade. Departing, Hale conferred with Terence under a veranda draped in wisteria, the scent cloying against their schemes. Can't nail it yet, but that one's the rootmaster on Hawthorne's spread. Plan, feign retreat. Watch like hawks. He'll slip, contact a runner, and we'll pounce. Elijah felt the snare tighten, an invisible chain coiling. Hale's gaze had pierced like divine judgment, exposing cracks in his facade. Assumption, surveillance lurked in every shadow. He ceased all whispers, amplified obedience, fields plowed straighter, tasks completed swifter. Yet the network hummed unchecked, other guides shepherded souls, routes alive with flight. August 1846 scorched the land. Jacob, a lithe youth from Terence's fields, bolted via Elijah's pine forest corridor, now stewarded by disciples. Clean vanish, no trail, timed with dusk winds scattering scents. Terence frothed, Hale recalibrated. Surveillance yielded not, Elijah dormant as a seed in winter. Force was needed, drag him into light. Coalition formed, owners in smoke-filled parlors, plotting. Hale's radical whisper, bait him with poison fruit, turn hunter. January 1847, chill winds rattling shutters, Hawthorne summoned Elijah to the big house. Parlor glowed with firelight, shadows dancing on polished floors like tormented spirits. Sit, Hawthorne commanded, unusual as manna in desert. Elijah perched rigid, senses alert to the trap's teeth. Cyrus Hale pegs you as the escape architect, Hawthorne stated flat, eyes boring like augers. No proof, but patterns scream it. I concur. Silence from Elijah, face a mask of stone. Your crossroads, I could lash you, sell you south, or worse, on whim alone. Power needs no evidence. Pause, heavy as judgment. Or, ally with me. Driver's role, authority, perks. Use your lore to reclaim runaways. Bounty per catch. Live like a king among chains. The offer slithered venomous, brilliant temptation, refusal damning as confession. Acceptance? Betray brethren or sabotage from within. Elijah weighed souls in balance, refuse, perish useless, accept, navigate the serpent's path. I accept, he murmured, voice steady as Jordan's flow. Days blurred in strategy, feign hunts, shield the web. Appear adept yet thwart success. Sacrifice pawns to guard kings, moral arithmetic that scarred the soul. First quarry, weekends, husband and wife fled south, panic-driven from separation's threat. No network aid, blunders glaring, moonlit night, river roads obvious, tracks like breadcrumbs. Elijah deemed them doomed anyway, credibility demanded capture. He led Harlan's party, dogs baying, lanterns swinging, tracing to a creek bed 7 miles out, couple huddled, spent. Harlan's grin split the gloom, worth his salt. Returned in chains, lashed publicly, backs striped red, cries echoing like lamentations. Sold apart, their gazes haunted Elijah, a thorn crown pressing. Calculus, 2 for hundreds. Agony undimmed. 6 months, 14 pursuits. 5 recaptures, unguided fools, inevitable prey. 9 foiled, misdirected trails, misread signs, fog-blamed, tide-timed. Parties bogged in thorns, fugitives gaining grace. But the toll mounted, each catch a mirror to his mother's scourging, skills forged for freedom twisted to fetters. Nights, Elijah knelt in dirt, whispering psalms, deliver me from evil, Lord. Let not my hands stain with brother's blood. Then Sarah, early 40s, Grayson Hawthorne's veteran, quiet as Ruth, devoted mother to 3 ages 8 to 14, faces etched with her resilience. Conversations sparse over years, escape? Unthinkable with young. Risk multiplied like plagues. September 1847, Hawthorne's coffers bled from ventures sour, solution, sells Sarah's eldest boy, 14, sturdy for auction. 3 days' notice shattered her. In fields, amid cotton rows whispering in breeze, she neared Elijah, they're ripping my child away. Help us flee. Gut plummeted. With young? Odds plummet dogs, patrols. I know. But death trying beats living broken. Her eyes mirrored his mother's, fierce love defying Pharaoh. He nodded, 2 nights. I'll guide. But Hawthorne watched, spider patient. Evening summons, Sarah's frayed on the sail. Might bolt. Shadow her. If she runs, lead the reclaim. You're proving ground, loyalty or lie. Trap sealed, aid Sarah, unmask, recapture, soul shatter. 48 hours, anguish in quarters, whispers outside Sarah's cabin, children snoring soft. Hawthorne suspects. Sets me to snare you or myself. Despair crumpled her. No escape? 1. Elijah forged mid-sentence, plan birthing like revelation. Costs all, slim chance. Outline, Sarah's escape blatant noise, tracks. Elijah leads hunt into swamps peril, storm-scarred sinkholes, mud voracious. Chaos ensues, party mired, rescue diverts. In tumult, Sarah recaptured seeming secondary, later, network spirits her true. Flawed as Gideon's fleece, but soul spark. Sarah assented. 2 nights, Sarah fled clumsily, bumps waking witnesses, Prince bowled toward swamp. Dawn alarm, Hawthorne marshaled Elijah commanding, Harlan, hail observing, 5 riders, dogs frothing. Fetch her, Hawthorne growled. Prove your mettle. Into mire, water high from rains, ground traitorous. Elijah tracked her deliberate path, excuses ready, broken reeds here, boot scuffs there. Deeper, air thickened rotting leaves, stagnant pools reflecting twisted cypresses like fallen angels. Hour in, the maw. Storm-hollowed pits, mud liquid beneath veneer. Elijah skirted one, accidental. Harlan plunged thigh-deep, suction gripping like damnation. Shout triggered chain, next man sank, then third. Thrashing deepened quagmire. Dogs howled chaos. Rescuers destabilized further ground quaking, more ensnared. Hale stood apart, eyes locked on Elijah. Realization dawned, no mishap. Orchestrated judgment. The swamp, Elijah's ally, swallowed the wicked, exposing the hunter as prey. The swamp claimed its due that fateful day in 1847, mud rising like judgment from the depths, swallowing pride and power alike. Hale's voice cut through the chaos, low and venomous, you orchestrated this. Elijah met his gaze amid the thrashing men and frantic dogs. The swamp did, he replied evenly. Storms changed the ground. I simply forgot to warn of the flood scars here. Hale's eyes narrowed to slits. You forgot nothing. And now I see you plain. Extraction dragged 4 agonizing hours. Vines hacked with Bowie knives, branches lashed into crude rafts to distribute weight across treacherous pockets. One man gashed his leg deep on a submerged cypress knee, the wound wept black blood, infection blooming swift in the fetid water. They emerged limping, mud-caked, pride shattered, back to Hawthorne's gates under a sky heavy with reproach. Sarah's trail had vanished into mist. 3 days later, they found her, huddled in a hollow oak less than 8 miles out, half-starved, eyes defiant yet dimmed by exhaustion. 30 lashes followed, public, merciless, her cries a lament echoing across fields. Confined afterward in the sick house, she bore the scars of trust betrayed. Elijah's gambit had collapsed. Exposure complete. Hawthorne's rage erupted like a storm long held, tracker status stripped, Elijah hurled back to field labor under iron watch, no Sundays wandering, no errands beyond sight, every step shadowed. Death or sale would have been cleaner, but Hawthorne chose humiliation, a living cautionary tale, broken yet breathing. Hale departed Georgia a week later, his report cold, the architect identified, but the network too vast, too root-bound for one man's uprooting. It lives without him now, he wrote. Destroying it demands armies we cannot muster. For Elijah, the aftermath carved hollows deeper than any whip. Mobility lost, cover shattered, Sarah suffering for faith placed in him. The network he'd birthed no longer needed his sheltered guides trained in his image. Pressed on, bolder in his absence. Escapes surged, dozens, then scores, threading the paths he'd first walked. Roads pioneered in secrecy became arteries of exodus, carrying souls from Georgia's red clay into freer air. Yet for Elijah, 1847 to 1848 marked nadir. Hard labor dawn to dusk, body aching under sun and overseer's eye, soul weighted with failures. Nights in the quarters, he knelt in dirt floors, whispering to shadows, "Forgive my shortcomings, Lord. Let the seeds take root where I cannot tend." Guilt gnawed Sarah's lashes, the recaptured, the trust eroded. He felt expendable, a spent tool in the divine forge. Then November 1848, Hawthorne felled by fever, body racked 3 weeks, estate fracturing as overseers vied like jackals. In that chaos, a message slipped through, a sympathetic free black driver delivering cornmeal concealed a folded scrap from charity. In Pennsylvania, she'd forged coalitions, abolitionists, Quakers, free congregations knitting a vast web from deep south to Canada. Elijah's Georgia roots fed it, hundreds liberated by his methods, his name spoken in northern safe houses like scripture. Your work endures, the note read. It multiplies. You mattered then. You matter still. Purpose reignited, faint but fierce. Confined, he could no longer guide directly, but he could sow a quiet lessons began, to young field hands, under guise of storytelling by firelight or shared water breaks. Not explicit routes, too dangerous, but fundamentals, watch how water carves low paths, follow the humble. Birds flee before storms, heed their flight. Memorize the land's moods, it speaks when men are silent. Seeds planted in fertile minds, perhaps blooming years hence. Hawthorne survived, weakened, spirit dimmed. Preparations shifted, son James summoned from Charleston, versed in shipping ledgers and northern efficiencies. James viewed slavery pragmatically, not immoral, but inefficient, a drag on profit amid rising industry. He calculated coldly, free labor cheaper long-term, political winds shifting. Elijah observed, patient as tide. March 1850, a young escapee from neighboring fields reached Pennsylvania, detailing Elijah's network to abolitionists. Debate erupted, buying freedom validated ownership, yet for architects like Elijah? Worthy exception. Secret negotiations commenced, intermediaries, free merchants, Quaker conduits, threading messages south. A year of whispers, coded letters, cautious probes. Elijah persisted cautiously. Rachel, late 1850, fled with 2 children using layered guidance. 3 men, early 1851, slipped patrols via rerouted intel. Intermediaries shielded him, subtle signals, knotted cloth, bird whistles, planted herbs. November 1851, Hawthorne's second fever struck fatal. James assumed full reins, finances grim, losses mounting, system untenable. Liquidation began, parcels sold, workers manumitted piecemeal. January 1852, summons to the big house. Elijah entered braced for chains. James extended parchment, manumission. Economics, not mercy, James stated. You're strong, you'll labor elsewhere. Don't become my burden. Take it. Go. 33 years in bondage ended on a ledger line. Elijah stood frozen, paper trembling, freedom, not thunderous, but real. He walked out, unchained, into Georgia's uncertain dawn. He lingered in state, journeying to Darien, coastal cradle of his youth. Boat pilot work, guiding vessels through tidal mazes, wages honest, movement unbound. Freedom's tools, no passes, open coordination with free communities, alliances with captains ferrying souls north. 1852 to 1861, network flourished. Elijah, mobile and resourced, shepherded 120 souls, conservative tally from abolitionist fragments. Exact count unknowable, invisibility was design. 1861, war ignited. 1863, Union coastal thrusts. 1864, Sherman's march. Elijah volunteered, civilian guide, routes weaponized. Swamp crossings baffled Confederates, hidden channels ferried scouts, sympathetic hamlets yielded intelligence. The paths of liberation became avenues of conquest. Post-war, Darien settlement, marriage to Hannah, Virginia escapee via kindred routes. 4 children born. Modest home by Altamaha, surveyor and land agent helping freed folk claim property, navigate Reconstruction's treacherous maps. Discretion ruled, South remained perilous for resistance's architects. Public silence, but private legacy, teaching children landscape literacy, roots beyond paper. 1877, Northern researcher arrived, interviewing elders. Elijah, 58, body worn but mind crystalline, spoke 3 days, techniques, risks, moral reckonings. How hold all those details, the scholar asked. I didn't hold them separate, Elijah answered. The roots became me. Every ford, every hidden ridge, I walked them until they were flesh. Each soul guided gave them purpose. You don't forget what's written in your body and calling. Notes archived, rediscovered 1930s vital testimony on Underground Railroad's Southern sophistication. 1888, death at 69. Darien funeral drew over 200 freed folk, descendants, lives touched by his paths. Pastor's eulogy etched in church ledger. Brother Elijah taught freedom isn't mere departure, it's knowing the way, possessing knowledge to tread it. He drew maps not on paper, but into earth itself. Those maps endure for eyes that see. Physical roots faded, swamps drained, plantations fragmented, rivers bridged. Yet geography persists, channels unchanged, tides rhythmic, marshes breathing. Invisible, the paths remain as symbols of resistance, knowledge as power, maps. As politics, alternate visions enabling the impossible. Historians estimate 300 to 600 escapes traced to Elijah's innovations, 1838 to 1865. Uncertainty befits, success erases records, invisibility was armor. Owners feared a ghost of the swamps appearing, vanishing, guiding through impossible terrain, dismantling absolute dominion. Yet Elijah never saw ghostliness. He was a man who attended, remembered, understood observation's might. Across decades, he proved no prison unbreakable if its geography is known deeper than its builders. In 1947, great-grandson, 70, reflected, great-grandfather grasped what most never do. Land belongs not to deed holders, but knowers. He knew it best. The land endures. Georgia's rivers flow same courses, swamps rise and fall, islands shift with storms. In those quiet places, roots linger, not marked, not mourned, but real. Once the line between chains and liberty, despair and dawn. For those who listen, they still whisper, see differently. Walk humbly. Freedom is written in the earth for any soul brave enough to read.